Normally, when I start a new game, the very first thing I do is turn the difficulty down to its lowest setting. Trophy never understood why. He would always ask, why change the difficulty when you haven't even tried the game yet? Trophy has been playing games a bit longer than I have. Even though difficulty options have appeared in video games since way back in 1977, when the Atari 2600 released with switches on the console itself that could adjust the game's difficulty, gamers have often clashed over them. Keep in mind that I'm not talking about cheats or mods here, just game difficulty settings. The argument seems to stem from the fact that to some people, games are supposed to be a challenge. Unlike a passive form of media like a book or a movie, you are the protagonist of the game. The fate of the world is in your hands. You don't just sit back and watch the action unfold on your screen. If you want the world to be saved, you have to do it yourself. You use the skills you've learned over the course of the game, and you fight your hardest. If you fail, you start over and try again. Sometimes over and over and over again, if the challenge is that tough. If you succeed, you can actually feel accomplished because all that time you put in, all those hours spent perfecting your skills so that you can stand a chance against this final boss, were worth it. You really overcame that struggle. But that's just the point of view of some people. To others, they see that beautiful new game that everyone's talking about, and they want to try it too. But they have kids that need help with housework. They have a job to go to and bills to pay. They may have grown up with games, but free time is not something they get a lot of, and spending that little bit of time failing over and over to a seemingly impossible challenge is not going to work. Sometimes, they might just not be motivated or even be able to practice hard enough to play the game on hard difficulty. It's not that they are afraid of a challenge, it's just, what's the alternative? Never play through a game that they really want to experience? Besides, the argument that game difficulty is some kind of badge of honor is kind of antiquated, right? Kids in an arcade in the 90s may have been blown away by the fact that some kid shows up and is able to beat games no one else can. But let's face it, we all know that kids secretly worked 4 jobs to afford enough quarters to keep playing long enough to learn all of that. More importantly, we know that the kids playing the games weren't the winners. The real winner was the arcade owner, who had kids literally throwing money at him for 2 minutes of playtime and a shot at playground glory. My point is, as all of us have grown up and learned about the real world, we stopped holding up good players as idols and started looking at the accomplishment for what it really was. Cool, but not for everyone. Well, some of us learned. A lot of people still consider those they look up to as heroes. However, this point of view, that the gamers who are mechanically perfect at the games they play are somehow better than the rest of the gamers who aren't, that's the main issue here. When Elden Ring released, the video game community as a whole had long been enamored with FromSoft games. The gaming media has spent the last decade telling anyone who will listen how great the Souls games are, and how you are missing out if you let the game's intense difficulty stop you from experiencing them. But here's the thing, gamers of all types want to play these games. You can't look at their beauty and the excitement that the fans of the series have about them and not be at least a little curious about the world and the story you have yet to experience. But those games are not accessible. FromSoft doesn't really make a compromise with the player as to lowering the barrier to entry so that other types of gamers can join in the fun. And it's well within that company's rights to make that choice. They have decided that they are okay with fewer people playing their games because, for one thing, the vision they have for the game relies on the game being prohibitively difficult. And for another, more pertinent thing, they sell enough copies not to have to care. Luckily for me, and gamers like me, most game companies are not like this. Sony, for example, is an industry leader when it comes to prestige quality, immersive single-player games. Think The Last of Us, God of War, Spider-Man, and Uncharted. However, Sony recognizes that not everyone that wants to experience these games also wants punishing difficulty to go along with it. So the games contain ways for you to customize their difficulty to your preference. That's why I can feel comfortable experiencing a story like God of War. I don't have to wonder if I will have to grind a difficult challenge in the game unless I want to, and that choice makes all the difference for me. Trophy is finally, after a whole year, dipping his toes into Tears of the Kingdom. As a matter of fact, he's going to be streaming that initial playthrough on the Ramen Spot Twitch channel soon, so come subscribe if you want to see that and all the other stuff we'll be playing. As for myself, I've been playing Tears of the Kingdom since it was released, and I've just started over fresh before even finishing the first playthrough. I will tell you about it another time, but when Trophy was watching me play recently, he remarked that he was very surprised to see that Tears of the Kingdom seemed to be set to a very accessible difficulty level by design. As in, you can challenge yourself if you want to, but for the average player, nothing in the game is meant to be a roadblock. It's the polar opposite design choice to something like a FromSoft game, or the really hard games that Trophy grew up with. He also thought of our recently completed run of Baldur's Gate 3. He was amazed that a mainstream game that popular happened to default to such an easy, accessible difficulty level. Again, the choice to raise that difficulty and challenge yourself is always there, but by design, when you play BG3, you get to experience an epic story that is definitely purposefully skewed towards the easier side. Trophy would go on to really contemplate the nature of his relationship with the game difficulty, and this video is the result. While writing this, we decided that our next big game we would experience together would be Horizon Forbidden West. Yes, we know it's solo, we'll just be playing it at the same time. But before we jumped into that, Trophy wanted to go back and play Horizon Zero Dawn. He had played it back when it first came out, but got distracted by other games and never finished it. The main reason was, the first time Trophy played, he was on a more challenging difficulty. Everything took time. You had to acquire the right gear, you had to really stalk your prey and be slow and stealthy. And combat was punishing. He did enjoy it, but that difficulty was also the reason why he couldn't just jump back in and finish the game. Today's games are so complex that for people like us, and I'm sure some of you, you can't really switch between many of them. If you want to jump back in, you have to relearn so many skills and button combinations that you might as well just start all the way over at the beginning. But we are not the same people we were back in 2017 when Horizon Zero Dawn came out. We don't have the time we used to. So, in a true sign of growth as a gamer, I'm proud of you, buddy. Hehe. Trophy started a new playthrough of Horizon, but on an easier difficulty. He was very surprised to find that even after a lifetime of playing everything at harder difficulties, he didn't miss the struggle at all. Yes, the experience is different, because a lot of the tension is gone when you know that you will likely survive an encounter with a dangerous enemy even if you don't over-prepare or make a few mistakes. But the trade-off is that the story is much more enjoyable, it can be taken at exactly the pace you want, and you don't need to worry so much about the punishment for failure. These great games, with expertly written and told stories, don't all of a sudden become trash just because they are easier to get through. Trophy even admitted to me that I may have been onto something with playing these games on easy all this time. I can't even describe the satisfaction I have right now being able to rub it in his face and say, "I told you so."
Thank you for listening.